Well, good evening. So, for one last time in Idea Fest Week, I'm Paul Fanlett of the Capital Times, and I'd like to thank you. Thank you. Thank each and every one of you for being here tonight for our big finale. You know, when I interviewed Adam Kinzinger 2 years ago for my column, he talked about the need for what he called an uneasy alliance between conservatives like him and the sorts of progressives who dominate our city and may well dominate this audience in order to preserve democracy. Today, that cause has been magnified because the threat to democracy has never been bigger, as many of you have been here through the week and heard from Bernie Sanders and Keith Ellison and Al Hunt and Judy Woodruff and Bob Bauer and Anita Dunn today. And so this is a wonderful capstone to our week. We're honored to have the former congressman on our stage tonight in a conversation with two outstanding Washington Post journalists. Before I get to the program, I want to take a minute to thank the sponsors who make all this possible. Epic Systems, again this year, was our presenting sponsor. Our other major sponsors are Exact Sciences and HealthX Ventures. The session sponsor tonight is Godfrey Kahn Law. Other sponsors include Madison Gas and Electric, Alliant Energy, Ascendium Education Group, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Kessenix, the University Research Park, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Cargo Coffee, Madison Community Foundation, Leopold's Books Bar Cafe, Madison College Forward Theater, and Youngblood Beer Company. Our media partners include the Wisconsin State Journal, Madison.com, and Civic Media. You probably know that Adam Kinzinger was one of only two Republicans, Liz Cheney was the other, to serve on the January 6th committee, and it was in that role he became a household name. He did not run for re-election to Congress last year and instead founded a pro-democracy movement called Country First. He has a book coming out next month titled Renegade, Defending Democracy and Liberty in Our Divided Country. The Country First website describes the group as a uniquely American movement of reasonable people from all political parties and of none. It says when we band together seeking understanding, collaboration, and common ground, we can achieve durable, proven solutions and put our country first. We are fortunate to have two terrific moderators tonight. David Maraniss needs no introduction to the Idea Fest audience. He's been a driving force since we started this event in 2017, and I've thanked him 7 or 8 times this week, so it just goes without saying. He'll be joined by Patrick Marley, a Wisconsin-based Washington Post colleague who was on one of our panels last year, if you recall. Sincere thanks to them both. Adam Kinzinger was first elected to the U.S. House in 2010 from a sprawling northern Illinois district that included much of Rockford. Before that, he was an Air Force pilot who served in Iraq, and today is a lieutenant colonel in the Wisconsin Air National Guard. He said this about tonight: for 15 years, I've been in and out of Madison flying for the Air National Guard, and it feels like a second home. I'm excited to come home and be part of this great event, and we're incredibly excited to have him. Please welcome Adam Kinzinger and our moderators to the stage.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Adam, you can tell you're welcome in your second home.
Yeah, thank you very much. A couple years ago, if you'd asked me, do you ever think you'd get an extremely warm welcome on a political panel in Madison, Wisconsin, I probably would have said no, but it's great to be here. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for the beautiful weather today, too, by the way.
He flew up from Texas by himself in his own plane. Yes. Adam, there seems to be a certain poetry to the fact that your book, Renegade, which will come out in about a month, the publisher is Maria Shriver, right? Whose uncle, John F. Kennedy, wrote Profiles in Courage. And I think it's pretty fair to say that if their book were to be written again today, you would be one of the characters in it.
Thank you. Thank you.
you know, a lot of us feel that we got to know you through watching the January 6th committee, which in this audience, I'm sure at least 3/4 of them go back to the Watergate Committee and Country Sam Ervin, right? Which this is the modern variation of that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to start, and we'll get into all of that stuff, but I wanted to start with people knowing you before that. You know, I was under the misimpression that you went from the military to politics, but actually you started in politics when you were 20 years old.
I did, yeah.
Tell us about that
That's
and why
kinda
you got
weird,
in
isn't
and
it?
what your inspiration was.
Well, thank you. And you know, it's interesting. I've always believed, and now that I'm a new father, you can kind of see it, which is everybody has like usually a unique trait when they're young that I think sometimes can be a guidepost to what are they going to do or what are they going to be. And you know, you think about a kid maybe that has baseball statistics and can just, bring every baseball statistic to the top of his or her head.
My grandchild.
Yeah, that's great. Mine was politics. I was 6 years old, living in Jacksonville, Florida, and a guy was running for mayor who had a hot pink yard sign. It's the 80s. And for whatever reason, that like really kind of drew me as a 6-year-old. I'm like, why are there yard signs out there? And my parents, started talking to me about politics, and I was hooked. And 12 years old, I started a political club in my junior high. I got involved in politics, and it was just one of those things that was kind of etched into my DNA. And here's a good story really quick. I failed out of my first year of college, and that was at Illinois State University. And that was because, we got some ISUers, go Redbirds. But that was because I joined a fraternity, and that became my priority and not studying. And so I took 6 months off and got my life straight and made a lot of good life decisions and got reaccepted to the university and obviously finished and enjoyed it. But in that time, I was 20, and some guy that I knew came up and kind of jokingly said to me, "You should run for the county board." And I thought he was serious, so I started looking at it. And I ran, and I won. And here's a funny story. So I used to look a lot younger than I am. I'm 45. I think politics has taken its toll, so I kind of look my age now. But when I was 20, I looked like I was 11. And so I started out going door to door. And people would laugh when I told them I'm running for county board. So I just started calling people on the phone because I sounded older. But got elected, got reelected on that until 9/11 happened. So that was an early start for me.
Was that a nonpartisan election, or
No,
were you running
it
as
was-
a Republican? Or
It was I ran as a Republican. It was a partisan board, but it's interesting. I'm sure it's not like this now. There was not a single partisan issue on that board. At the time, I think it was like 17 Republicans and 3 Democrats on the board. There was never a partisan issue. Now it's, I think, a evenly split board.
so,
Now,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, now you have some pretty grave concerns about the Republican Party and where it's headed.
I do.
I just wonder if you could talk about what you see the best way out for the Republican Party is, both in the short term and the medium term, because the base, as you well know, is very committed to Donald Trump. And is there any way for them to win if they reject Trump, which is ultimately what you want them to do?
No, I mean, look, you said what's the short and medium term advice for the party? It's like repent. I mean, honestly. It has become, I think we were joking backstage. I go, I have a lot of Democrats that come up to me and they shake their head and say, I never thought I'd utter these words, but I miss the days of George W. Bush and the GOP. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand. Look, in what you're seeing right now in the primary, there's basically, we can talk about lanes and get into those details, but Donald Trump is going to be the nominee short of miraculous intervention. Maybe that's the DOJ, maybe that's going to jail, maybe it's, I don't know, some awakening that we can't foresee. But I think what bothers me the most about it is you have, 8 other people up on that stage that all have an opportunity to tell the people watching them the truth. Now, people ask me all the time, why is it that Donald Trump is so popular? And I go, well, I've come to realize it's a very easy explanation. If everybody you trust is up on that stage, so you say, I trust Donald Trump, I trust Tim Scott, I trust all these people, and Donald Trump gets in trouble, you're going to look to all these leaders you also trust to say, what should I think about this? And when every one of those leaders except Chris Christie says, This is a witch hunt. The DOJ is corrupt. There's a two-tier justice system, and Donald Trump is the best president ever. It is shocking that anybody wouldn't then say Donald Trump is being witch hunted, because everybody I trust tells me. And that, to me, is the biggest failure of these so-called leaders, is trying to preserve themselves, but in preserving themselves, they're actually tearing themselves, the party, and most importantly to me, the country, asunder because of absolute cowardice. I can go on more, but I know we'll probably come up.
So you have your Country First PAC. You were involved in 2022 in trying to assist candidates who were anti-Trump. What's your role going to be in 2024? What are you going to do to try to prevent Trump from winning another, or re-winning the presidency?
First off, I'm gonna keep speaking out, and I voted Democrat last time. I have no intention to vote Republican in 2024, because I think we have two choices in this country. Do you like democracy or do you not like democracy? Do you believe in authoritarianism or not? And so it really is that stark of a moment. And I want to quickly aside say that, and then I'll probably lose my train of thought so you can remind me of where we were. So to the Democrats in the audience, you have an opportunity to, you have a right, let me say it this way, you have a right to match the actions of the Republican Party. If you would do a Democrat version of what they're doing, you would be theoretically justified in doing that. My ask is that you continue to defend democracy, because we have to have at least one party that is committed to the defense of self-governance. And what I see in, like, people condemning Menendez, for instance, and we don't need to get into all that, but it is showing a party that is committed to truth and following the law. And I think the Democrats, after this moment that we're in, whenever this passes, will be judged very well for a commitment, an adult commitment to the defense of democracy. In terms of my role going forward, so Country First, we talked a little bit about, we got involved, for instance, against Madison Cawthorn. If you guys remember Madison, he had a primary in North Carolina that Democrats can vote in the primaries there, and it's like Illinois, and I think like you guys are. And we actually focused on Democrats to turn out in the Republican primary to vote against Madison Cawthorn. And he lost by like 3,800 votes, and we know for a fact we turned out 5,000 to 6,000 Democrats. And the point was, look, you're going to have a Republican representative in this district. You can vote for the Democrat in the general election, but you have an opportunity to have a say on whether you want to be represented by a Trumpist, corrupt person or somebody different. Those are the kind of things where I want to be committed to making a difference. We are a nonpartisan organization. We have probably more Democrats than Republicans involved. And so going forward, all I'm going to do is continue to speak out, speak loudly, and try to make a difference in those areas where we can.
Adam, you were dubious of Donald Trump from the beginning. You didn't vote for him in 2016 either, right?
Right.
And I noticed that you were at the inauguration in January of 2017 and saw what W would call the weird shit. But
yeah.
But you describe it yourself, what you saw that day.
It was a really weird day for me because, I was surrounded. I'm still at this moment, it's Inauguration Day 2017, I'm still in disbelief that this is happening. I mean, I'm still in disbelief that Donald Trump is, I still thought there would be some dude on a white horse to come in and save us up until 11:59. And, but I just remember having a sick feeling. All my friends, there's a good group of us that were kind of anti-Trump. I'll call it softly anti-Trump. And they're all gone now. We used to have a text chain called House People. It's now called Retired House People because we're all out. But we were all just kind of like, it's this weird feeling. And it was to see Donald Trump, when he came out, they announced the president-elect. And he didn't humbly walk out and wave at the people. He stood up and he raised his fist. And I think at one point he raised both fists. It's like something you would expect a dictator to do. And when he stood up in front of the American people, this crowd that was not many people there, by the way, let's just be clear, it was not record-breaking. I mean, maybe it was an average inaugural crowd, but it wasn't what he wanted. When he uttered the words American carnage, that stuck for a reason, and it made me literally, physically feel ill. Because you have an opportunity to stand in front of the entire world, and paint a vision of unity, bringing people together. This idea that we are all Americans. And he stood up and further stuck the knife in and further went after the other side and said American carnage. It made me sick. It was a really bad day because there was part of me that was saying, look, I'm a Republican. There's a Republican president. I should be happy. And I couldn't feel it. I got extremely, how do I put this politely, inebriated. We had a conference.
Back to your frat days, huh?
What's that?
Back to your frat days?
Yeah, no, I kind of had a relapse into my frat days. We had this Republican convention, and he came and spoke at it, and I took out my frustrations on the bottle. I had a great time until I had to wake up in the morning. So,
Well, let's fast forward 4 years past the actual presidency to before January 6th. As I understand it, you had a sense that something was going to happen that day.
I did. So leading up to the election, the death threats I had against me and my family didn't start on January 6th or when I took the job on the committee. They had been going on for basically since I had been speaking out against Donald Trump. And I'm happy to talk about where I feel like I fell short in my duties, including my first impeachment vote and things along that line. That would be something that I'd enjoy talking about because I think we need to understand that. But a few months before the election, I think Donald Trump for the first time said, the only way we're going to lose is if this is stolen. Now, I'm a big advocate. The thing that actually drew me to Congress is America's role in the world. I believe America has a unique and special role for millions of people that are trapped behind iron curtains, trapped behind poverty, trapped behind these things, that we have a unique ability to inspire people to better things. But I know that democracy, I used to think democracy was the easiest form of government because it's what we were all inculcated into. And we just vote and then those people get to do what they want. And I actually have realized self-governance is the hardest form of government. Because if we had a dictator, it would be pretty easy. We wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't have to worry about any of the political things. We just do what we're told. And so for a democracy to survive, there has to be a few things that you have a contract with your fellow American about. Number one, that you can vote. And this is why even in the last year or 2 years, I've become much more open-minded to this idea of the Justice Department coming in and enforcing fairness in voting because I've come to realize exactly what the intention of my side has been. You have a right to vote. You can vote if you're eligible, and the person that gets the most vote wins. If you have that basic contract, all of us can be a member of an entirely different party amongst ourselves here. But if we agree on those three things, we will successfully self-govern. When the President of the United States says that an election is going to be stolen, he shatters the idea both that your vote is going to count, because it won't if obviously this is stolen, and the idea that the person with the most votes and the most support will win. When you convince half of the country that democracy doesn't work, democracy cannot work. And the President of the United States was standing in front of the American people telling them that the system he has sworn to protect is going to fail and fail them. And there's no doubt, I'm not surprised January 6th happened. So I would watch Twitter. The election happened. We all know what was going on in that intervening period. And on January 1st, I'm on a conference call with all the Republican members, and Kevin McCarthy is leading it. And Liz Cheney opened it up, and she began to talk about why you cannot vote against the certification of the election. She went into some of her constitutional reasons and everything else. To that point, Kevin McCarthy had not told anybody how he was going to vote. But we all assumed, of course, he's going to vote to certify. Leadership is supposed to take the tough, votes. And the second Liz Cheney was done, Kevin came on and he goes, just so you all know, Liz is not speaking on behalf of the entire conference, just herself. And that's when I go, oh, S word. I know what this is going to be. So I was the first member then in the queue to ask a question, and so they call on me. And I just said, Kevin, I'm going to paraphrase. I said, Kevin, you guys are convincing the country, half of the country, that this election was stolen. If you just look at the roots of American democracy, It was born in revolution. It was born in the idea of, representation. There is no doubt there will be violence on January 6th because you are telling people this election is being stolen. And his response to me was, okay, Adam, next caller, operator. So on January 6th, I kept my staff home. I asked my wife to stay home. I used to say, I told my wife to stay home, and I learned quickly, don't say that. I asked her to stay home. And
Even before that, Adam, didn't you get an email from the head of voting security?
oh, yeah.
Dude,
Chris Krebs.
yeah.
So I had texted on the 2nd, or he texted me, I think there's going to be violence on January 6th. And the bottom line is Chris Krebs goes 100%. There will be violence. And you guys know Chris Krebs. He knows this stuff. So all these alarm bells, these warning signals are flashing. And we just marched right into it. Lauren Boebert that morning said, today is 1776. What does that mean? By the way, when you see those memes that say the storm is coming, think about what that's saying. The storm, storming the Capitol. So this was not something that just happened spontaneously. Some people were drawn into that. We can talk about that day. I won't go more into it.
Yeah, let's get into that day.
Okay.
So you tell most of your staff to stay home, right?
Yep. Told staff to stay home. I get in. I see, I try to kind of anonymously go into work and keep my head down because by this time I'm starting to get known among the MAGA folks as not their friend. And I remember walking around the Capitol in the morning and seeing a lot of people walking around with their MAGA hats. Now, keep in mind, the Capitol was supposed to be closed, right? You can't have guests. I couldn't even bring in anybody but direct staff. And there were these groups of people. And I wish we could have found more information about, what were they doing there? Were they scouting? All this kind of stuff. So anyway, I go to the floor of the House when this all starts. And it's kind of a mess, we're doing social distancing still, and so about half the members had to go up to the balcony, and I drew that straw since I came in late, and I was just I'm not going to go to the balcony, I'll just go back and watch from my office. And I went back to the office, and by the time I got there, I started searching Twitter, and you saw those first videos, remember, of the police officers being shoved, and by the time I get back to my office, I had to move my car, I parked in the wrong spot, anyway, different story. And I walk in, and a Capitol police officer lady I knew, she's listening wide-eyed to her radio. And I just go, and this is kind of a weird question when you think about it. I didn't say, what's happening? I asked her, I go, is it happening? Mm-hmm. And she goes, yes. And she just looks at me with this panicked look. She goes, they're using bear spray. And I was like, So I go up to my office, I walk in, kind of sit down at my desk, and behind my desk is my window that opens slightly, and if you look out my window, you actually see kind of the other end of the Rayburn building, and beyond that is the west front of the Capitol where all that action was happening. I open my window, and I'm just hearing boom, pop, boom, explosions. And that happened to be the moment that D.C. Metro showed up and actually allowed Capitol Police to retreat in to secure the building, and they held the perimeter. They are the unsung heroes, by the way. Had the Metro PD not shown up in force like they did, the Capitol would have been sacked, totally sacked, like the Brits did to us. And so all this is going on. I call my wife, and she just tells me, she's like, if you go to cspan.com or .org, you can see, they have all these different views. And so I click on Statuary Hall. That's where all the statues are, just outside of the house. And I don't see anything, but I can hear. And I hear chaos. I hear crashing. I hear chants. And then I see the first people. Now that moment, when you were around the Capitol, or I've been around the Capitol at that point, 10 or 11 years, I knew that the second that was breached, I had started to see indications on Twitter that the line had been breached, but, all of a sudden, when you see massive amounts of people in the Capitol, there is nothing that separates you, me, at this point from that mob. They broke a line. The only thing standing between, if they know where they're going, between them and me is about 2 Capitol police officers that man a checkpoint in the tunnels underground. And at that point, the alarms were going off now and everything else. I had my gun that day, and I never took my gun to the Capitol, because there were so many Capitol Police, and I'm not one of these people that carries a gun because I think it feels cool. I'll carry it if I feel like I need to. And I took it that day, and I remember distinctly pulling it out and putting it on my desk. Now, did I need to do that? Probably not. I had it on me. But it was this idea that I looked at that and I'm like, I might have to use this against my fellow Americans. So I locked myself into the office and, we go through that. But I'll tell you I'll wrap up the story in a second, but I'll tell you the weirdest thing. Look, I won't get too much into my spiritual beliefs and all that kind of stuff, but I will say this. There was a moment after I got off the phone with my wife and I saw those people coming through Statuary Hall, and I got to tell you, the only way I can describe this, and I'm not one of these people that say this, the only way I can describe it is I felt a deep, thick darkness that just fell. And I felt like the presence of evil. And I know that sounds weird, but that's what I felt. Mob action, this anger. And I actually had Capitol police officers later tell me the same thing. They felt there was this evil. And anyway, I'm locked into my office. To make a very long story short, I finally go back onto the floor of the house when we're back open again. People always ask me what it feel like to go back on the floor, and I guess I gave kind of a half-truth answer because I initially was like, the majesty of democracy. And, no, I was pissed off. I go back onto the floor angry. Not because of what happened, I was mad about that, but because sitting on the floor were all these jerks that were going to still vote against certification of the election, despite what they saw. I gave a speech where I basically said, I ended it with the emperor has no clothes, guys. Let's call this out. And every time I've given a speech on the floor, behind you hear muttering of usually people like, good job, or something, something a little reaffirming. It was dead silence, just like this, when I finished my speech. And that hit me. These people are not on my side. And I turned around, and we know the rest is history. The last thing on that day, going home at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm leaving, and I see my first National Guard troops. And as a proud Wisconsin Guardsman, by the way, as a National Guardsman myself, sitting there all day, begging for the National Guard to come, and then seeing my first Guard troops was both the most proud thing I've ever seen and the most sad thing I've ever seen at the same time. And that was a very emotional moment for me.
That's not a long story. That's a powerful story.
Yeah.
And
I can't believe I lived through it.
You've said that for at that moment, you felt the sense of evil, but you also lost your faith in humanity for a moment.
Yeah, for a little bit at least.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the crowd. And I'll say this now, speaking as a Christian, I'll say, when I watched people blowing shofars, and I get into a little bit of this in my book in terms of the symbolism, people blowing shofars, what you don't know is that is actually some emblem of the end times. This in the Bible, it talks about the rapture and the shofars. That's what people were blowing those things for. They did a Jericho march the day before January 6th as they marched around the Capitol, so the walls of Jericho to come down. You saw people with flags bearing Christianity. You saw people with Confederate flags, and sometimes they were carrying both those things together. And I saw people singing hymns and praying on the floor of the Senate. I lost my faith in the leadership of Christianity. I have not lost my faith. But these people are being failed by the pulpit. They're being failed by their leaders.
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you think of the way some of your former colleagues reacted to all this. You had Kevin McCarthy say that Donald Trump was personally responsible for January 6th in the immediate aftermath. Soon went down and visited him in Florida and is now, very closely tied with him.
Of course.
Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin made a video that got a lot of attention at the time from his office as January 6th was happening, pleading with the president to stop it. Now he's pretty silent about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You have Elise Stefanik, who went from a Trump skeptic to one of his biggest cheerleaders, now replacing Liz Cheney in the leadership role. And I just wonder what you make of this sort of changing attitudes you saw among your peers in the Republican Party.
I still don't believe it. I mean, I believe it, but I still don't process it. Mike Gallagher, for instance, I thought the day before impeachment, I predicted we'd have 25 yeses. By the time impeachment vote came, I was pleased to get 10. Because the last 12 hours, what you would see is people say, oh, well, but I'm worried about my reelection. I'm worried about my reelection. And anybody that I talked to that was on the line on impeaching that mentioned their reelection as a concern, they all ended up voting against it. What the hell do you need this job so bad for? Like, I don't get it. Mike Gallagher was one of those. I mean, Mike Gallagher was, I think, an iota away from voting to impeach. And then a month later, he's kind of on the front lines against Liz Cheney. How do you make a pivot that quickly? And look, I still like Mike. I appreciate what he's doing on this China task force. You know, Republicans and Democrats working together. But when democracy was on the line, what did you guys do? What did you do? Why is it like this? Look, all of us in our lives, I think, we struggle with our identity. Like, who are we? If you introduce yourself to somebody, what do you say you are? Hi, I'm Adam, I'm a father. Or is it, hi, I'm Adam, I believe this thing? Or is it, which it was for me, hi, I'm Adam, I'm a congressman. Your job becomes your identity. We all struggle with this. When that identity is threatened to be torn away. Now imagine, it takes ego to run for politics, in case you didn't know. Imagine for 12 years, any room you walk into that doesn't have the President of the United States in it, you are the center of attention and the most powerful person in that room. That's what the life of a congressman is. Now imagine when you're faced with losing that. And all of a sudden, against your timeline, that is threatened. Now also imagine you come to wake up and realize, like, okay, this got way out of control, I need to do something. But then you have to answer for the fact that for the last 4 years, you enabled Donald Trump. It's the sunken cost fallacy. Why did we not leave Vietnam after we lost 10,000 men? Because we'd already lost 10,000 men. We can't leave now. So why is it that you don't turn against Donald Trump? Because I have to admit then my role in enabling him. And so I think the identity, and the last thing with this, ladies and gentlemen, is I think people fear more than death, people fear losing their tribe. I think they fear being kicked out of their tribe more than they fear losing their life. And I'll tell you, getting kicked out of the tribe, it's not fun. It's brutal. My co-pilot in Iraq 8 months ago sent me a text and said he was ashamed to have ever flown with me. Yep. And I laughed about it initially until I've come to ponder my life in the last 10 months, and I'm like, that really hurt, right? Can you imagine that?
Did you write him back?
No, I told him, I did. I used a few choice words that I won't, in polite company, and I blocked him. So I'm like, you woke up in the morning and felt like you just had to send me this. Right. Okay, fine. I hope you feel better. But I think all those fears come to play, and then the poison is you can convince yourself of anything. Why is it, and by the way, watch this in politicians in the future. If a politician votes against something or for something that they know they shouldn't, they usually find a nuanced reason to vote against it. Mike Gallagher, I think, but at least some of them said, I'm voting against impeachment because it's technically not this incitement to insurrection because of this technicality. What do the senators say after they refuse to remove him? Well, he's not president anymore. You technically can't remove a guy who's not president anymore. You're finding a nuance. You can convince yourself of anything. And you can convince yourself that if it's not me, it's somebody worse. Therefore, I owe it. I'm doing my service by staying. But when everybody lies to their followers and says the not truth about Donald Trump, you're doing no service to anybody. And can I just say also real quick on that? It is so liberating to just tell the truth. I got to tell you. Like,
Adam, the motto of the Capital Times from its founding was, let the people have the truth and the freedom to discuss it, and all will go well.
Amen. Amen. And by the way, just quickly, local media is so damn important in this environment. I just want to say that because it connects people to their community and it tells truth. So thank you guys.
Yep.
One group that got a lot of attention on January 6th and in its aftermath was the Oath Keepers. And
Yeah.
I understand it, the Oath Keepers approached you early on in your career in Congress. Tell us a little bit about what that was, what you knew about the group, how you reacted to it, what you came to learn about them later.
So I didn't know, this is probably back in 2011, 2012. I didn't know what the Oath Keepers were, probably like most people, and most people probably didn't know till January 6th. And I was at some event, and this guy came up to me and just was like, hey, you're military, you believe in your oath to the Constitution, right? Yes, I do. And he's like, and you know that your commitment is not to the president, it's not to the government, it's to the Constitution. I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, there's a group of like retired military and police officers we are swearing basically to defend the Constitution. We are keeping our oaths that we have taken at one point or another. Thank God I didn't ask any further questions, and I didn't obviously join them. But I remember it was like kind of that's kind of an interesting theory. You have people that are trying to hold people accountable to keeping your oath. Well, we know what that was. It was obviously a militia with an intent to overthrow the government. But that is the scary thing about that is, and if I'd have stayed in Congress, one of the things I wanted to focus on when it came to like veteran suicide and veteran post-war is, we do a really good job as a country of giving people health care, patting them on the head, veterans, by the way, patting them on the head, telling them, great job, here's a paycheck for the rest of your life, now go fishing, and you're 22 years old. And then we wonder why they struggle with depression. And because when you reach an apex of kind of a physical action, when you're a 19-year-old kid and you're fighting in a war, this is like all your alarms are going off and you're like in the most intense moment ever. You can never match that again. Like you'll never match that again. And so a lot of people strive to do it. It's why they turn to alcohol. It's why they turn to drugs. Well, what you see is a lot of folks sitting around that either wanted to be in the military or were in the military and struggle with that feeling of purpose. And then a militia comes along. It's where it's so very good at this. It comes along and it gives you a purpose to fight for. And if you think about it, imagine having defended this country in a faraway land, coming back, you lose your uniform, nobody cares that you were in the military anymore, and now this brotherhood comes together and says, we're a brotherhood. We're going to do what you used to do. We need you. We need your skill set. And we're going to defend the righteousness of this government. You can see why it's an extremely, extremely attractive offer. Same thing with gang membership. It's like, you're raised in a home that you feel unsafe, in a neighborhood you feel unsafe, and a bunch of bigger kids come along and put their arm around you and say, we'll protect you. You can see what that is. And that's a really dangerous moment we're in the military and in these militias.
Yep.
After January 6th, there was this discussion of forming like a 9/11 style bipartisan commission.
Right.
And that didn't come together in the end. It turned into a more traditional congressional committee. Can you talk to us about how that changed over time and what the ramifications of doing it the way that Congress ended up doing it?
I've got to say the most valuable player for the January 6th committee is Kevin McCarthy, because he absolutely screwed up by pulling his members off. So, this started as like a 9/11 commission. The idea was, equal number of Republicans, equal number of Democrats, nobody in office, former members, right? So that kind of immediate politics is taken out. It's sad we have to think like that, but we do. And actually, that is what Kevin McCarthy came out in support of right away. By the way, quick aside, the whole reason Donald Trump is still a political entity is Kevin McCarthy. When he showed up to Mar-a-Lago, and I could talk 30 minutes about the impact of that. I can touch on it briefly if you guys want later. But when he went to Mar-a-Lago, he took Donald Trump, who was dead politically, and he came in the political ambulance, and he pulled out the political paddles, and he brought him back to life in a snap with that picture. And I felt it in the conference committee with the Republicans, who were sitting around wondering what the future of this party and Donald Trump was, and all of a sudden recognized he's still alive, and then they're out there defending Donald Trump. Happened the next day. So on the committee, Kevin McCarthy was all for a censure of Donald Trump or a January 6th, commission, like the 9/11 commission, until it came to pass. And then Donald Trump didn't want it, so he changed. So then he tried to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi, to her credit, came out with a very fair initial committee offer of like even Republicans, even Democrats. I think it was even. And people like Mike Gallagher, for instance, said, you know what, I like it, and I know I've come out in support of this, but there is a thing in this resolution where it gives Democrats a little bit more power to subpoena than Republicans. And that became the reason people voted against this. That's an excuse, by the way. And so then finally we pushed through this committee, and I think Liz and I were the only Republicans to vote for it. And and there was this rumor that they were going to put a Republican on the committee. And I'm just like, please, Jesus God, don't let it be me. Honest to God. I was like, no, God, no. And then she announces Liz Cheney, and I'm free, right? Thank you, Liz. I love you, Liz. Thank you.
Why didn't you want to be on it?
Because I knew what was coming. I knew what was coming. And I knew we had to have a good Republican on there. But Liz is a really good Republican that could do this, and it didn't need to be me, right? Like, it's like in war, people sometimes are willing to charge the hill. They don't necessarily want to charge the hill, right? They'll do it. And so Kevin then, threw his temper tantrum, pulled his members off, totally thinking that would scrap the committee. But yours truly came along, and actually I was the only one that occupied a Republican seat on the entire committee, because Liz technically had a Democratic seat. Mm-hmm. So that story was, he pulls his members, and I start hearing these god-awful rumors now about me. And I talked with Jamie Raskin, and a few people, Eric Swalwell, who I'm friends with, and all called and kind of...
Jamie's the one who came to try to get you, right?
What's that?
Didn't Raskin come?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I had a few people putting out feelers, because I think Nancy's a very smart politician, and she doesn't want to ask and have me say no.
Right.
And so it's end up Jamie Raskin invites me over to his office, and we sit down, and his office is literally across from mine. And he's like, "Would you do it?" And I said, "Look, Jamie, I'll be honest, I don't want to do it. But I said, I know that if I'm asked, I will have to do it. I will do it. Because there's no way I can live with myself, having not done this." And so evidently me telling him that was a affirmative yes, because the next morning I wake up at, oh my gosh, so late, 7:30 on a Sunday, and find out that Nancy Pelosi already announced me. And then and I'm like, what the hell? And but she then turned around and called me after her press thing, and she's like, well, I tried you this morning at 5 a.m., by the way. I'm like, I guess technically you did. And so that changed my life. Not in a great way in terms of my actual kind of how to live life, but it was really the proudest moment of my life, because I've learned that the times I voted against my party, I'd be one of the few to vote for the Violence Against Women Act, those kinds of things. And those are the moments you are proudest of, when you stand against your party, because it reaffirms to you that you have some internal fortitude. And we can get more into the details of the committee, but I'm glad I did it.
Was there an immediate sense that the committee members were all one, or did you and Liz Cheney have to make any agreements with the Democrats?
Oh my gosh, it was... There has never been a committee like this in history that I know of. Mm-hmm. You're the historian, you would know, but I don't think there will ever be anything like this again, unfortunately. But that's also, it goes to show how the stars aligned at this moment.
Yeah.
I mean, Liz Cheney, who, if I'd have on January 5th, 2021, mentioned the name Liz Cheney in here, you guys probably wouldn't be super excited about, or Adam Kinzinger, but Liz, so I show up to my first hearing. So I basically got appointed, and Liz and the others had already had this committee set up, so I kind of came in at the end. And so I'm kind of getting the download on Liz, and I expected that there would be kind of the minority side and the majority side, and we'd figure out, I'd probably get a staff allotment. And she pressed hard on me. She goes, no, we are not going to do this even if we're working together, there's not going to be two sides. We're going to be all one. And I'm like, that makes total sense.
She's the one who pushed that.
She is. She's the one that made it very clear that there would be no daylight between us. Not just us on the committee, but the Democrats and Republicans. That is to her credit. She, by the way, I think she's a sung hero, but she is a hero on this committee. The other very big hero is Benny Thompson. And the reason, he's a great leader, But he has this unique ability. You know, we all probably once a week would all individually get pissed off about something happening or pissed off at another member or whatever. And he had this really good ability to just kind of chill, right? Let everybody lay low. We'd have disagreements on issues. Are we going to fight this in court? Are we not going to fight it? Are we going to, you know, one of the big battles, are we going to charge people like Peter Navarro civilly or criminally? Mm-hmm. You know, we'd have these differences. And he had a way of smoothing this thing out. And by the way, it is unheard of in American politics for somebody like Benny to let Liz Cheney take the spotlight. And he did. You know, he could have been the one demanding the spotlight. He let her do it because he understood the importance of having Republicans speaking out on this. And every member of that committee I am a friend with now. Many of them I was friends with prior. Became really good friends with Adam Schiff because I immediately knew. Like on our first meeting, I said, I have to take the narrative because there's two Adams. So I called him Adam Sr. and called myself Adam Jr. And I made it stick because he's older than me, and I wanted everybody to know that.
Yeah, I wanted to take you through some of those characters. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I've read the manuscript, and it's really a terrific book. But
thank you.
Your descriptions of Liz Cheney are very interesting as well. You said she has some of her father in her.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of pushing for what she wants.
So Liz is she's very dogged.
Yeah.
She wants to get her way. And sometimes that would rub all of us the wrong way. You know, there would be moments where, you know, you're cursing Liz Cheney because there's a question of, you know, how do we want to go about this or do this? And she's determined it's going to be like this. Mm-hmm. And we're like, well, look, we're all members of the committee. We all have a vote. Sometimes we just get our feathers ruffled of like, how dare you? So she has that tenacity, which especially in this moment, we absolutely needed. And I'll tell you the other thing. She was the most educated about what was going on and all the details of everybody that was testifying of anybody on that committee. I mean, to the point where all of us, Democrats and then me, would call Liz if we had a question about something that somebody said because she was like a steel trap in terms of knowing this stuff. The whole Cassidy Hutchinson thing happened because Liz had built quite a rapport with her and encouraged her to tell the truth. The whole emergency hearing, by the way, that we had with Cassidy Hutchinson, we didn't know it was her until about 7 hours before that hearing. I had to go to D.C. not having a dang clue what I was going and who the surprise witness was. I'm like, is it going to be like Trump or something? I don't know. So Liz is, yes, an incredibly determined person, which obviously can rub people the wrong way, but in this case was extremely necessary.
Were you frustrated by that at all, that you weren't able to find out who
Yes.
this witness was?
Yeah.
And I mean, what information did they give you before that hearing?
So we had a problem, especially early on in the committee, with leaks. And I mean, it became tense on the committee where, like, staff thought members were leaking, members thought it was staff who was leaking. It probably was everybody. I can say hand on the Bible.
We at the Post did not have a problem with that.
What's that?
I said we at the Post did not have a
Yeah,
problem.
I know you guys didn't. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You made my life hell. But that was the battle. Is like, I mean, I can honestly say, straight-faced, I did not leak a single thing. But the thing that we didn't like the leaks particularly about is, you know, I went into the first hearings thinking all this like powerful stuff has already been out there. Like, I didn't realize, like, actually, if you put it all together as a narrative with the more stuff we have, it is extremely powerful. Mm-hmm. But I think the leaking was a concern kind of early on. And how did I get onto the leaking?
We were talking about Cassidy Hutchinson's surprise.
Oh, the surprise. So I had like plans. I think I was coming up to do military, and I get a call from Jamie Fleet, who works for Pelosi. He was kind of our guy on the committee. And he's like, hey, we need you here for this hearing. And I'm like, okay, who is it? I can't tell you. I'm like, what do you mean you can't tell me? Is like the NSA tapping our phone? Like, what is it? And I called Liz. I can't tell you. I'm like, come on. I'm like, what? But I'm like, okay, is it worth it? And they're like, yes, you have to come. And so it is what it is. And I'm glad because I do think her name leaked out a few hours prior, but I think it was very essential for Cassidy's sake that didn't leak. I mean, I think she says in her new book that she almost ran out. I mean, what a hero she is. And look, you know what's crazy? You know, you have all this like this I'll call it this. I hate the overused term, but I think in this case it's apropos, the toxic masculinity, right? You see this in Rudy Giuliani and others. The heroes, and there were a lot of male heroes, but the real heroes were people like Cassidy Hutchinson, Sarah Matthews, these young women who actually had more courage than the oldest men in the White House. It was amazing.
I wanted to ask you about one other committee member, maybe the least known, but the one you worked with the closest was Elaine Loria.
Yeah.
Fellow member of the military or service. And what was your relationship with her like?
It was great. We were I'm pretty sure, the only two veterans on the committee. Yeah. And she was Navy. I don't hold that against her, but, but you got to do that, right? Of the Air Force. And anyway, but we decided, so we were friends. She was very whip smart. What I respect about her is she would stay generally pretty quiet until she had a very salient point to make or had a really good question. A lot of people in politics will speak up all the time. If you're ever in a meeting, particularly a political one, and somebody says, just to reiterate or let me piggyback, it means they're about to say something they don't need to say, right? We can get this done faster. But Elaine, we had, when we got these kind of set of 8 hearings that we were going to do. By the way, I went into these hearings, and even until the report was published, I went in very worried that we were going to fail. No committee like this has ever succeeded, honestly. It was not until January of this year where I realized we succeeded. I don't know why I got choked up saying that, but it was just so anyway, Elaine, we make a decision as we're picking these hearings. I get assigned the Department of Justice hearing, and I'm like, guys, I am not a lawyer. Why are you giving me this? In hindsight, it was very smart because as a not lawyer, I think I was able to not get into legalese to talk about the fact that Donald Trump literally said to the acting Attorney General, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. What a statement. All I need you to do, DOJ, is to put a stamp of authenticity on the lies I am about to tell. Just a little tiny white lie on your end. And it's not even a lie. You could say the election was corrupt or there was some concerns. And let me then take that doubt and destroy faith in democracy. And then, so that was that hearing. And then Elaine and I got the last hearing, the 187 minutes, because we both had taken 2 oaths in our life, one through Congress and one through the military. And it was entitled, I think we called it Dereliction of Duty. Right. And you think about this, for 187 minutes, Donald Trump, and if I could go back in time and do this hearing again, I would say this line or something similar 6 times in a row. Donald Trump, for the first time in his life, resisted peer pressure to act, to do anything. Everybody knows the last person to talk to Donald Trump on any policy is going to be the person he follows. He had people coming into his office, telling him to call off the mob, telling him to stop, telling him to do this. And he didn't just fail to do that. He proactively allowed this to continue. He proactively chose not to call the Pentagon. He proactively chose, by the way, he never suggested 10,000 troops. I don't know why that lie continues. He proactively chose to do nothing until the moment when he realized that law enforcement had turned the tide of that battle. Only when he realized the tide of that battle had turned did he then very meekly call off the mob, because he wanted to see if it would work. That is not a dereliction of duty. It is a complete act of traitorism to this country.
One thing I'm curious about, you said it was only this January that you determined that the committee was a success. What was it? Why did it take so long for you to assess the committee's work, and what was it about that made you reach that conclusion?
I think when you're in the middle of a war, you don't, if you're fighting in a trench, I guess, your focus is how do we take that next trench? By the way, God bless the Ukrainians right now. I just need to say that anytime It is sad, but very, very inspiring to watch people defend their democracy, like actually defend it. But when you're in the middle of combat, you're just like, I'm going to take that trench, I'm going to take that tree, I'm going to take that hill. And it's only when, in essence, the war is over that you can look back and say, we succeeded. And for me, I think I had so much fear in this whole process that, look, I made this decision to basically destroy my career, which, don't have sympathy for me, it's fine, truly. I make more money now, so, it's like, when you make that decision, but the fear is, did I do this all for nothing? Are we going to be ashamed of are we going to be made to look like fools? And I think it was once we finally got that report out, which, by the way, was a last-minute barn burner to get that thing done, then I could look back and say, we succeeded in this.
And now, here we are, there are indictments against Trump on a number of fronts, 4 jurisdictions.
And he is an official rapist by the court of law, by the way.
How much do you view the committee's work of having contributed to what happened with the indictments? What do you think of the way the indictments, particularly the one related to January 6th, has been presented? And do you feel like there's any evidence that you turned up on the committee that maybe hasn't gotten the attention it deserves?
It's a great question. Remind me on the last one, because you guys know I can get off on a trail and forget. I think the work of the DOJ is, and I don't say this arrogantly, it is 100% the result of what we did on the committee. Mm-hmm. And we know that because when we did our first hearing, and you had these moments of, oh my gosh, right? Like, whoa, what? That text message is real? We know for a fact that then the DOJ started scrambling. And we know in hindsight, too, that they were basically, as they should have been, focused on arresting the people that went into the Capitol. But there was a kind of a, whoa, Nelly, let's hold the horses back when it came to going after the big fish. I can understand the concern on that. It's a big deal. But, and that would be my criticism of DOJ, as this should have started. They should have had this stuff far before we did. Mm-hmm. And we don't even have half the power they do to get this stuff. So I am proud to know that had we not done that on the committee, I don't think you'd be seeing Donald Trump staring down this indictment right now. In terms of how do I feel about the indictment, I'm very sad and I'm very happy it's happening at the same time. I'm happy because we are a nation of laws, okay? Doesn't matter if you're left, right, anywhere in between. If you violate the law, you pay the price, and it should be the same price other people would pay for doing the same thing. I mentioned the Menendez stuff earlier, right? It's not helpful to the Democrats right now, but the Democrats are saying, it appears that this guy broke the law. He should step aside. That's what honor is. Donald Trump can never be seen, because listen, ladies and gentlemen, if he is not held accountable, what we're saying to the American people is, you can try a coup anytime you want, as long as you fail. And if you succeed, you're in charge anyway. So what is going to be the incentive to not try something like this? And so, yes, this has to happen. I'm proud it's happening. I want to see Donald Trump behind bars. And that's not... I want to see that because we never want to be a country that prosecutes the last administration, but we also can never be a country that accepts the garbage of what happened in the last administration. And finally, on the, what was the last thing I did?
It was, if there's any evidence that hasn't got the attention that it deserves.
I wish we could have done 10 more hearings. One of the areas that I think evidence-wise, there's probably not much we were able to turn up that we don't know now in the public sphere. But one area I wish we could have spent more time on is the fundraising aspect of this. Donald Trump raised $300 million on a lie. We know it was a lie because the people that wrote the fundraising emails said they knew they were lying, but they also knew they had to pump out 15 emails each a day because each email would raise $80,000 basically. And they're like, we knew we were lying on it. We didn't care. We just had to turn it. These are RNC people that wrote emails, by the way, testifying to this. And on that briefly is the role that those emails and that fundraising campaign played in radicalizing the American people cannot be understated or overstated, whichever the right state it is. Because when you open your email and you have 20 a day emails that say things like Nancy Pelosi's going to kill you, Donald Trump's election was stolen, Pennsylvania was stolen, this thumb drive was that, just by reading that, you get radicalized. And so the role of fundraising and radicalization is something I wish we could have spent more time on. We need real fundraising reform in this country, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely.
Adam, throughout this hour, I can feel the emotion in your voice.
Yeah.
Which, and there wasn't a single uttered line of political boilerplate. It was you're the opposite of a political automaton, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
But I wanted to close by asking you about the toll it's taken on you, both the way that you were disowned by your tribe and your own family before, and also what it's been like with post-traumatic stress, perhaps after you left Congress.
So it's interesting. Sorry to use the battle analogy again, but I read a book recently by an author named Adam Makos, and he's also the same author that wrote if you saw the movie about the first black aviator in Korea on an aircraft carrier, that's his book, that's his story. He wrote a book about a tank in World War II that was, basically one of the few tanks to survive, and so the story of this crew. So when I got out, it was like the analogy I felt, and I didn't feel this right away, it took some time, is like I feel like a tank that just went through the worst battle of World War II and survived, but is really scarred up and is really damaged, and it's not ready to go fight. It needs time to take inventory of what happened and then go back in. By the way, I'm at a place now where I feel ready to re-engage, and I am re-engaging. But thank you. But the toll it took on me was pretty intense. I mentioned what my co-pilot did. My immediate family has been pretty good. I have an uncle that likes to make smart comments occasionally about, I'm a traitor, haha, joke, right? I went to see my parents one day out of probably 30 on average when I was in Congress, and I happened to show up on the day. We received a certified letter from all of my dad's cousins, which proceeded to disown me, tell them that they were ashamed to be Kinzingers, that I literally am a member of the devil's army, because I've lost the trust of great Americans like Rush Limbaugh. I'm serious. Tucker Carlson, they said that. I'm sorry, I've lost their trust. That kind of stuff. And when you're in politics for 12 years, this in my case, the Republican kind of network of people around me, they kind of become friends. And all of a sudden you lose all that too. And there are days I would wake up and say, I can't be doing the right thing because the fact that I'm the only one doing this means I'm missing something. And I've just come to realize that people in their life, very few people get a chance to do something as public as I did. Very few people that get that chance do it. And so it's taken me time, and I'm still working through the real, true impact it's had. We're also still working through the impact it's had on my wife. I mean, having a 24-hour security detail sounds cool, and it is for about 3 hours. And then every day after that is very tough because you feel separated from people. I wanted to go to the bar and have drinks with a friend after one of the hearings, but I realized, okay, I'm going to go out, stay late. These guys who have to be back at 7 a.m. in the morning are here with me. I'm going to make them stay up. I've now drawn attention to myself because I'm walking in with a security detail. And by the way, I would go out for a walk in my house in Illinois and have a police officer following me because, who knows, somebody could come up and pull a gun on me. That on my wife took a massive toll. When she got a letter that said, how dare you name your son how dare you name your son Christian because he's the son of the devil. And I hope your son is killed in traffic. People write this stuff. What kind of sick MAGA brainworms do you have to even put that in an email or a letter? And so the impact it's had has been tough. Now let me say all that and caveat with this. I wouldn't do a damn thing different. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Adam,
Thank you.
whatever, without diminishing what you lost, what you gained is greater.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this audience shows you how much they appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I appreciate that. Thank
So
you.
thank you very much for tonight. And
You bet.
it's a great way to end this Idea Fest.
God bless Madison. Thank you, guys. Thank you.